Welcome to the Legit Football NFL podcast. Brian McFadden here, ready to recap all of the exciting divisional round matchups. It wasn't quite the barn burners and the thrillers that we had last week, but nonetheless, there were some great games, there was some good football, and it set up some amazing matchups. And as we do it, I'm not doing this alone. Joining me today to take a look and to recap and to look back at the games we just witnessed in the divisional round, I've got Kevin Phillip Fox coming back again, regular guest, Bills fan. Kevin, I think this will end up being part recap, part therapy for you.
I've never needed it more, Brian, and I appreciate you having me on. I'm very excited to chat about everything this weekend, especially get some therapy for my Bills.
What better place to get your emotions out there than in an audio video medium where lots of people get to watch you crumble in real time?
I think it's actually peak content is going to be me crumbling today.
Your emotions will be good content for the show, and if you're game, I'm game. Let's go ahead and bring in Darian Parker of the Dr. D's social podcast. Apologies if I didn't say that exactly right. Darian, are you ready to talk some football, man?
I'm definitely ready to talk some football, Kevin. We're going to get you that therapy.
Oh,
but maybe not. A little. Maybe not.
Okay, it'll be
we're at least we're going to let him talk. Whether he comes out of it feeling like he's in a better place, I can't promise that.
There you go.
But I can promise a platform for you to talk. Darian, I know that when we spoke before, we talked maybe about your favorite team, but remind me, is there a team that you tend to root for, or are you just like the whole NFL?
I just love the NFL. I mean, a long time fan, 30 plus years, watch every week, and just excited to chat about this compilation of games, which is interesting to say the least. Yeah.
I've said it before, this podcast and all the podcasts I've done are really just an excuse for me to just chat football with some people. And the fact that we put it out there and people enjoy it is just a bonus to me. But let's go ahead and jump into the games. We'll start in order. We'll start with the two Saturday games, go into the Sunday games. So, Kevin, you got a couple games to kind of warm you up before we get to your Bills. Let's start with first game on Saturday, Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead. 27-20 victory. Trevor Lawrence, the special Jaguars season comes to a close. The biggest story coming out of this, and we can get into this a little bit, I think we'll talk more about it on the preview, is the injury to Patrick Mahomes' ankle. But also, hey, the Jags, they were never completely out of this. I mean, this was a good game, Kevin. Did you think at all that there was a time when the Jags were going to pull this off?
I actually felt a little borderline confident that they were going to pull it off when Mahomes got hurt. He was limping around doing the little hop after every play, and I was like, this is their chance. It felt like the game was wide open. And I have to be honest, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. It appears that the Jaguars' feet are just covered in bullet holes of their own shooting. Honestly, the turnovers were just so inopportune. They weren't able to capitalize on any of the stops that their defense has made. Chad Henne went 98 yards. Who would have thought? That was good football.
And that is, but it's important to note that was Pacheco's drive. Like, Isaiah Pacheco absolutely took over that game. He averaged nearly 9 yards per carry in this one. And hey, Henne drove the bus, but Pacheco was the engine.
He's establishing himself, I think, as a really legitimate running back in the NFL. I think there is going to have to be a long conversation in the offseason about his value in fantasy and his value as their potential RB1 going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's already clearly got over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Mm-hmm. McKinnon is really more of their pass catching back, although he got 11 carries in this, surprisingly.
Right.
Darian, Mahomes post-injury PFF grade 54.8. I mean, you don't need to see advanced metrics to see that he wasn't the same guy after he got that, what we now know is a high ankle sprain. Kudos to the guy. Comes back in, plays, throws a touchdown off his left foot because why not? It's Mahomes. Is that worrisome going forward? How big of an impact do you think that'll have? And how do you think Trevor Lawrence did in his second ever playoff game?
Well, I'll start with Mahomes first. I think it was a little worrisome, and also it reminds me of the year that they were in the Super Bowl with the Bucs, and he wasn't healthy that year either, and it showed. They also had not a great offensive line during that time too, but I think Mahomes, a lot of his game is predicated on moving, on being mobile, creating those plays, that kind of those sandlot plays. You get outside the pocket, and then Kelsey is always open. I mean, 14 receptions, crazy. How they didn't even account for that is unbelievable. The Jaguars for that. They're basically putting D linemen out there covering him. It was crazy. But I think it'll certainly be an issue, the mobility, because it's such a big part of his game. The Jags, I love the Jags. I mean, I feel like whenever you get down like they get down in the previous round, you feel like you can always come back. You're like, man, we should have lost that other game, but we came back.
27-0. That's
right.
nothing.
You think I could do
this?
this? Reminds me of the Chiefs when they got down big against the Texans.
Yep.
It's like you think you can always come back. But I think the Henne drive was incredible. Pacheco was great. I agree with you. Pacheco's on my fantasy, my legacy league. He's amazing. I think he's a superstar in the making. They have to start featuring him some more. I think they will in the future. But I think, and we'll talk about the Cincy game and stuff. I think they're running into a potential buzzsaw against Cincy coming up here. I mean, they own the Chiefs the last 3 rounds, 3 matchups. Joe Burrow is trending way up, and I think that injury is going to be a big issue for the Chiefs.
We're definitely going to break that down. I could spend the next 20 minutes talking about the impact that injury is going to have. We'll have a preview show. Kevin will be on that with Pro Football Demon. But I want to talk a little bit more about Jacksonville because they were in this game. They had opportunities, Kevin. You mentioned there were some timely or untimely turnovers. You had Jamal Agnew fumbling the ball at like the 4-yard line. That interception late in the game that essentially sealed it. It was a great one-handed interception by the rookie Watson, but one of the things, two to 3 points I want to make, and I want to get both of your takes, but Kevin, I'll start with you. The Jaguars are actually running the ball well. Travis Etienne had over 6 yards per carry. It seemed like every time he got the ball, he was making 1 or 2 guys miss. He was getting chunk yards, but they didn't really stick to the run. On the other side of it, they really have been known for pushing the ball down the field at least a few times a game. Trevor Lawrence only had 1 pass over 20 yards the entire game. It was an incompletion to Christian Kirk. Now, part of that is because the Chiefs actually ran a lot of cover 4, quarters D, just deep zones, keep everything in front of him. And for whatever reason, that seems to befuddle the former number 1 overall pick in Lawrence. And we didn't really see the adjustments. That's one of the reasons maybe they were running the ball. Why did they go to such a conservative game plan? And why did they not run the ball more when it was working?
It's really difficult to say because I noticed that as well. I like JaMychal Hasty fine. I think he's a really great RB2.
Had 2 great returns too.
Yeah.
I mean, great as a specialist.
I was a little disappointed that ETN didn't get it going a little bit more. I felt like ETN could have been the guy in that game. And it kind of felt like he was relegated to more of like a change of pace role, which I don't really get. I kind of think he's a stallion. I know he's might not have the size or the profile of a stallion, but in the playoffs, it doesn't matter. In the playoffs, you have to do what you have to do to get dubs, and I didn't think they did that. As far as their way to attack the Chiefs through the air, I was extremely disappointed in the lack of pushing the ball down the field. The one that they had, Kirk really should have caught that ball. Correct?
Yeah.
Correct? He was.
Sure.
I was very, very disappointed in that, and I thought Ingram could have gotten going a little bit more. I noticed a lot of like tight end screen sort of situations.
Yeah, Chiefs did a great job of tackling, which the Jaguars have had success on those screens this year, not in this time because of the way that Casey was able to tackle.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed that they didn't get Ingram going a little bit more down the field. I don't know if Marvin Jones had any impact on the game at all, which is disappointing because he's the vet, but it's kind of fascinating how Zay Jones continues to be one of their most effective weapons. I did not see that coming. I've always thought that he had potential, but he looks.
Yeah, him, the former Bill.
Yeah, he was tough in Buffalo. I try not to hold those days against him, but he really looked pretty legit this season, and I'm excited to see his role in the offense moving forward.
I actually traded for Tony Pollard late in my season in one of my dynasty leagues, and I had Zay Jones as a throw-in, and that definitely won a playoff game for me because the first round of the playoffs was the game where he had 3 touchdowns. But Darian, I want to talk a little bit more about the Jags here. So there's really 2 ways to regularly beat cover 4. One is obviously running the ball because you've got at least 4 defensive backs instantly going into deep zone. And 2 is to hit more of the middle of the field. And the Jags, whether it was a lack of adjustments or Trevor Lawrence, do you think this is something that Lawrence can adjust to? Do you think that this is like the playbook is out for teams next year on how to really slow down this Jags offense?
I think the Jags are just going to get better. I thought they did a great job they paid a lot of money for all the acquisitions that they had this year, and pretty much they've come through at this. And I think Trevor Lawrence, his first year with a coach that really believes in him and is coaching him properly. Peterson, is a winner, and he's shown that. And I think there's just been stability there. I actually think Trevor Lawrence you're going to see a lot better version of Trevor Lawrence. So this was a great version. I mean, the Jags turned it around. Who would have thought they'd win a playoff game? The Jags, when you looked at them kind of midway through the season earlier, like same Jags, probably eventually it's going to, it's not going to, but they really came back. And I thought he played incredibly well down the stretch of the regular season, had a crazy first round where all those picks in the first game, and then came back. And I thought he was pretty solid. I think it's just time, maturation. I think he's definitely their guy. And I think they need to, I think a lot of teams get in trouble with this, is they start going away from the running game. Even when it's effective, it's like the quarterback has to win the game. It's some reason we feel like the quarterback has to be the one to control it. But clearly they were averaging so many yards per carry. Etienne was doing great. Stick with it. Time of possession. Keep Patrick Mahomes on the bench. He was already hurt. Take control of the game. The linemen want to run block. They want to hurt somebody. They want to get out there and push that. And I feel like just started getting away from that. They were in that game. And if it wasn't for that fumble, honestly, it may be a different result. Seriously, they had all the momentum. It was going. So I think they showed a tremendous amount of resiliency. And, it's a team that's on the come up. A lot of times that happens. You take a step, then you take another step. I think you're going to see another step next year.
And that's the good news, Jaguars fans. This is still a very young team. This was Peterson's first year. This is Lawrence's second year, Etienne's second year. You think about the talent they had on the other side of the ball. Josh Allen has become the other Josh Allen.
Yeah. The other Josh Allen
has become an absolute stud. And they got quite a bit out of Trayvon Walker, their first overall pick. So there's just pieces all across the board. And as you mentioned, all those free agent wide receivers, it actually worked. Usually you do that, and most of the time you get a Kenny Galladay situation. In this case, it actually worked for them. But like I said, I would love to talk more about the Mahomes ankle thing, but we will cover that on Friday, because this really was a different Chiefs team completely. Mahomes still found ways to throw touchdown passes. It's Mahomes, but Cincy is not Jacksonville.
I'll say one last thing really quick. I just want to give some credit to the Chiefs defensive line. I think they really made a huge impact in this game. Chris Jones is an animal. He really, really is a difference maker up front. And I think that's a big part of the reason why they ended up winning the game.
1 sack, 2 tackles for loss for Jones.
I would have been remiss not to give them some credit.
You're right. I'm glad. You actually had a stat here I didn't bring up. As a team, the Chiefs recorded 2 total sacks, 9 QB hits, and 12 QB pressures. They were all over the place. And once again, teasing the preview on Friday, if you're gonna run with the Bengals, you're gonna have to have that kind of effort again against a surprising Bengals offensive line. Once again, to keep teasing that game, Kevin. Not gonna talk about it just yet. Let's get to the second Saturday game. Philadelphia Eagles, number 1 seed, coming off the bye against the upstart New York Giants with that dominant win. I know it wasn't a big difference, but they had control over that entire game last week against Minnesota. Everybody's saying Danny Dimes is like an elite. He's in elite territory. 38-7. It was 28-0 by halftime. Jalen Hurts came out red hot. I think he was 8 for his first 8. 3 total touchdowns. Kenneth Gainwell had over 100 yards on the ground. The defense got pressure. The defense got turnovers. It was a complete team effort. It reminded everybody, which I figured would happen, which is why I picked the Eagles, and I thought they'd win this game easily. But it reminded everybody that, these guys were number 1 in the NFL, certainly in our power rankings for much of the season. Darian, did you see this coming ahead of time? Did you think the game would be a little closer, or did this kind of work out the way you expected?
This isn't hindsight. It's 2020. I was like, this is going to be one of the big blowouts of the weekend. I called this. I said, the biggest thing is everybody was really on, Danny Dimes. He had this great 300-yard game, Minnesota Vikings. Well, he only had, I think, 2 or 3 300-yard games the entire season. 2 were against the Minnesota Vikings.
2 against Minnesota.
The Vikings defense is straight trash this year. Very bad. Swiss cheese, so easy. So I said, the Eagles, they just dominate teams. They control the clock. They have an incredible offensive line. Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, and then their running game, they could either throw it over top or they could just control the ball. And I feel like their team, they know when something's working, they don't deviate from it. If they're running it against you, they're going to run it down your throat the rest of the game and run for 300 yards total as a team. And I think that's what makes them special is they know who they are. They have an identity and they lock into that. When they get you down, they don't let you back in the game.
I want to call us out a specific play that lines up very much with what you said, Darian. They know what they're doing. They do it well, and they'll continue to do it. They have kind of pioneered this double cheek QB sneak rugby scrum where you just grab two butt cheeks and just push the QB forward. They lined up on a 4th down in this with that formation, and what do? They pitch it to Gainwell, who gains like 30 yards. Like, I love that. Everybody thinks they're going to do what they've done all season. And credit to Shane Eichen and Nick Sirianni for being creative with that offense. This team is, I've said it, top to bottom, roster-wise, top to bottom, including the quarterback position. They're the most talented roster in the NFL right now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing their next game. Smother Jones, I don't have. Let's get the stat at the bottom. 31-point win was the largest playoff win over a divisional opponent since the 1970 NFL AFL merger. That's how much these two teams were mismatched. By the way, the Eagles beat the Giants 3 times this year, and none of the games were particularly close. Absolute domination. Jalen Hurts rushed for his 14th touchdown of the season, including the playoffs, tying Cam Newton in 2011 for the most by a quarterback in a single season all time. And by the way, also a phenomenal passer. Devontae Smith had some great plays in this one. A.J. Brown sprung a block on the touchdown that Devontae Smith scored. Kevin, what were your takeaways, or is it all kind of like, yeah, the Eagles were going to steamroll them?
It's definitely fair. Like, I absolutely understand the line of thinking that they were going to steamroll the game, and I was not surprised that they did. I did kind of think Daboll and Jones and the ragtag bunch of misfit toys that
buy into the narrative. Yeah,
I kind of felt a little bit more confident that they would at least create something, but it wasn't overly surprising that they didn't. I will say I think the biggest takeaways that I had from this game are the continued establishment of Jalen Hurts' dominant MVP level of play. I didn't see it coming. I don't think a lot of people did. I thought fantasy-wise he would be an excellent quarterback. I did not see him stepping.
Honestly, I'm not sure there's anybody outside of Philadelphia who could have honestly said they saw this level of MVP caliber play coming.
He is a top 5 quarterback without question. And I'm also blown away by the fact that it seems like they have 2 number 1 receivers. Devontae Smith he's really doing the thing, and he's behind A.J. Brown, obviously, because A.J. Brown is maybe a top 5 wide receiver, but Devontae Smith
definitely. I'll say it definitively. A.J. Brown is a top 5 wide receiver, maybe top 3.
I'm happy to have that conversation, and I think Smith is not far behind him. I'm really, really impressed with the way they built their team. I loved what Darian said about identity. That resonated a lot with me because I feel as though there are some great teams that don't have that, and seeing Philadelphia lean into it so heavily, they deserve to be where they are on offense and defense, and I think they're going to be one of the biggest threats to win it all this year in the Final Four. I think they up there with Cincinnati for odds for me to win it all.
There was one play in this that I think kind of encapsulated the difference in playing a team like the Vikings and then playing the Eagles. Because the Vikings, their biggest weakness is the secondary. They have a decent pass rush. You've got Daniil Hunter. You've got Zadarius Smith. You have guys who can get to the quarterback. And when they got pressure on Daniel Jones, he would scramble around. He would make plays because that secondary just couldn't cover the guys like Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James, which, I think Hodgins is like their wide receiver 1 now. So it's not slander on them so much as in this game, the interception that Daniel Jones had, the Eagles got pressure almost instantly. He moves around, he throws it, and Bradbury's just there to step right in front. Former Giant James Bradbury, who was released.
That hurts. That one hurts.
Yeah.
Juice on
but that just shows you, and that's why. And once again, we'll break down the really looking forward to breaking this down on the Friday show against the Niners. Is that even if you would get their pass rush, they've had great linebacker play. They have maybe the best secondary in the NFL. And you look on the other side of the ball, you mentioned 2 wide receiver 1s.
Crazy.
Dallas Goedert. Probably top 3 or 4 tight end. You've got the best offensive line in the NFL and running backs who may not be any elite, but you don't need them to be elite. Like, you can get a Boston Scott touchdown mixed with Miles Sanders, getting some chunk gains, mixed with Kenneth freaking Gainwell getting 100 yards. It's like, where's their weakness, Darian? I don't see it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it helps. One of the biggest things, this is a financial thing. When you're not paying the quarterback, you can have all that talent on all sides of the ball. That's going to be a situation in the future. But, it's certainly when you could pay all the supporting cast and you can get that well-rounded of a team, you can be very successful. With Jalen Hurts, he is my dynasty quarterback. I'm pumped
Same.
up about it.
You're
Same.
so
But
lucky,
I
Darian.
got him. I
Yeah.
got him like the year before when I was like, I'll just pick him up. I don't
crumbled,
know.
by the way, when he was out of the lineup. I'm like, I made it to the semis and I got destroyed because Hurts was putting like 35 points up a game for
like
me.
crazy numbers in fantasy. But I think they will have to figure this out as goes along. But it's to me clearly the most complete team and the team that knows who it is the best of all the remaining teams, I believe.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm especially excited. I'm a regular guest on the 49ers podcast. I live 20 minutes from Levi's Stadium, so I've really covered the Niners more than any team outside of my hometown Dolphins, and the fact that I cover the whole league with legit football. So really looking forward to this matchup. I love both matchups.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we've beat around the bush enough, Kevin. Let's
Let's
go
do
to
it.
Sunday. Let's do it.
I'm so ready. I'm so
Let's
thank you
talk
for
about
this.
at Buffalo in the snow. If I told you the final score was 27-10 prior to Sunday, you would think, oh, wow, man, Josh Allen, they played. DeMar Hamlin was in attendance.
Yep.
They came ready to play at home in front of their fans on a snowy Buffalo playoff football in January. It was the complete opposite. I'm not going to set up the game anymore, Kevin. I want to hear your thoughts as a diehard Bills fan first.
I really appreciate you giving me the floor. And I've been looking for some solace for the last 24 hours. And I think I finally found it. I'm excited to have a rational conversation with smart football guys. It doesn't get better. I'll tell you this. The place to go for mental health is not Twitter after your team melts down in the playoffs.
That's not news, by the way. I think even the people who go on Twitter know that, hey, I'm not going here for the best mental advice.
I definitely might have been on it too much. I'll say that much. But I'll tell you this. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. But I'll tell you this. I don't think Buffalo. I think they had their worst game of the season at the worst time. I think they were flat. I think their energy was low. I think a lot of the holes on the roster and a lot of the holes in the schemes were just gashed open. Gashed open by Cincinnati in the worst way on the worst stage. And it's tough that it's at home. It's tough that it's in front of DeMar. But I think I'm a little nervous about the Steph Diggs thing, but I think a lot of the things that happen are probably, unfortunately, I hate to continue to say this every year, but it feels like I do think that they're trending in the right direction. I know this is kind of a step back.
They took a small step back.
It's a step back, no question. I'm confident in the makeup of the players and the coaches and all that they have. I think there needs to be an honest conversation about each coordinator.
Yes, I was going to specifically ask you about Dorsey because that is the one big missing piece. They added pieces. I mean, I know that Von Miller was injured, but they added pieces in the draft. You think about James Cook, Khalil Shakir didn't have a huge, but he showed up in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But the biggest difference was that their offensive coordinator is now taking the Giants to the divisional round of the playoffs where they've got Ken Dorsey, who they started hot, but this offense never reached the levels that it did last year.
I think the big thing is rhythm. I think there was never really much of a rhythm established pretty much all year. I watched every single game, every single second, and no short passing game to speak of. I don't think I've seen the Bills throw a screen pass I think they might have started trying some towards the end of that last game, but I don't think I've seen it in like 10 weeks. And really way underutilizing Steph Diggs. I know he was heavily targeted on the year and his numbers are great, but he had too many games where he was virtually disappearing, and you can never let a wide receiver a top 3 potential wide receiver in the NFL disappear. I think that's on the OC. I know it's on Josh too, but I think a good coordinator reels your quarterback in and says, you have Stephon Diggs. We gave him this huge contract. Throw him the ball. Those are the big things I wanted to say. I would love to hear Darian's thoughts because I'm interested in hearing what he has to say about it. Do you want to help me out, Darian?
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting? I feel like I'm not sure the result would have been different 20-something days ago when
I think we saw it with the way Cincinnati marched right down the field.
Cincinnati came down that field and they looked confident. I don't think it mattered where the game was going to play. Cincinnati's on a mission. This is a team that's ascending to something very special. Last year, they was like a a great story of like, wow, I can't believe they're still winning this year. They expect to win. They expect to be there. I think Buffalo was honestly just in their way. It felt like Joe Burrow is ascending to Mahomes, right under Mahomes level. He's getting there, and Josh Allen has kind of regressed a little bit back behind that. I think for Buffalo, the big problem I think with Buffalo is their identity is too much Josh Allen, in my opinion. I think they need to establish a running game. They have not, and when they run the ball well, they get away from it. They completely just start going Josh.
And by the way,
Allen
run the ball
centric.
not just with Josh Allen. Run
Right.
the ball
It's
with,
like,
with a running back.
This is Big Ben itis territory heading in the future. It may not get hurt and be out the game, but those hits are going to they're going to add up over the years, right? And a 35-year-old Josh Allen may not be great if he keeps taking this punishment. But I think overall, Cincinnati came in. It felt like this was a business trip for them. They were ready. They came out firing. And I think the Bills, the loss of Von Miller, I think is a much bigger deal than we're talking about. I mean, Von Miller was one of the big keys for the Rams to win that Super Bowl. He is a wrecking machine. And you saw when he was playing, he was killing guys out there.
Oh, we mentioned it last week that they went from like fourth in pressure rate to like 28.
Right.
Yeah. It was
with Miller gone. It was literally night and day.
Astronomical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to pressure the quarterback. You know, if you don't do that, it's going to be hard. The quarterback sits back there and just picks you apart. That's what
with a
what
banged up O-line too. That was a tough pill to swallow. Not it was game planning. They knew exactly where to protect the deficiencies. They ran at the rush a lot of the times. Joe Mixon had an incredible game. He was
gashing every time he got the ball. It was like 6-7 yards or more.
He's so underrated. Burrow, all credit in the world to the Bengals. The Bills, they melted down and they had a bad game, but the Bengals showed up. You're right. It's a buzzsaw effect. Who knows if a great Bills team or a great Bills effort does anything in as far as affecting the final results of that game. That game kind of felt like it was Cincy's to win the whole time. And it's a tough pill to swallow as a fan, but as a lover of football and as a fan of a team with no chips, I'm definitely happy to see the Bengals still in it, and I'm definitely slightly rooting for them, to be honest with you.
I want to call out Joe Burrow for the maybe the quote of the playoffs so far when they asked him after the game about what about they with the neutral game and the fact that the Bengals weren't involved, only if Buffalo won against the Chiefs would there be a neutral game. He's like, better send them refunds. I was like, man, this guy.
He's much swag, man.
So much swag. You gotta admire it.
I definitely thought the Bengals they ran with that storyline about them selling tickets, but the Bengals were selling tickets for in case the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Chiefs. You know, everybody sells tickets to every game that's not yet to be played, but they really they ran with it, and that's what good teams do. That's good coaching. I can't be mad at it.
I want to take a holistic view because when I picked the Bills. I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl in the preseason. I picked the Bills all throughout, and I picked them to win this game. And I usually, especially with these kind of matchups, because I do a lot of research, you guys know, to make sure I understand these matchups.
Yeah.
What did I get wrong? What did I see? Because it's one thing if it's a close game and one team, like last year, you can't say, what did I get wrong against KC? What you got wrong is that they lost the coin toss. That's not analysis. But to get beat 27-10 at home in the snow, and for Buffalo to look as bad as they did, and it was a couple things I realized. One, if you look back to the start of the season when everybody had these high expectations based on how Buffalo ended, and then they destroyed the Super Bowl champions in week 1 and destroyed the Tennessee Titans after that. But then you realize that the Rams that were into one of the worst teams in the NFL, like in retrospect, and the Titans completely collapsed and ended up being one of the worst teams as well and didn't make the playoffs. And then you realize that they lost to the Dolphins, who had their ups and downs, and they eked out some other victories. They lost to that Vikings team that we mentioned earlier. And all of a sudden, these kind of pieces, like maybe they're not as good as they were last year. The offensive line seemed worse. They had absolutely no running game short of Josh Allen for most of the year. Their pass rush was phenomenal with Von Miller, non-existent without it. They did have a lot of injuries. Micah Hyde gone for the year. Jordan Poyer missed many games. Tre'Davious White didn't start until I think week 5 or 6 or later.
I think it was like halfway through the year.
Yeah, halfway through the year. So I mean, you had that too, but it's like, but on the other side of it, I was convinced that this offensive line would be a problem because I remembered last year for the Bengals that was they got sacked 9 times against Tennessee. Yeah, they won, but literally they lost the Super Bowl because they couldn't block Aaron Donald, and he got in on the final play on that 4th down.
Yeah.
And here they are playing three backups, their offensive line arguably in a worse condition than it was a year ago, and they allow one sack and very few pressures and just absolutely controlled line of the scrimmage on both sides of the ball. DJ Reader had a fantastic game on the defensive line for Cincinnati, and they came in expecting to dominate, and they did. That was the thing that surprised me. Not that since he won, I picked the +5.5. I bet plus 5.5. It's not that I thought it would be a close game. It's that they just absolutely dominated from start to finish. That surprised me.
I think that's definitely the hardest pill to swallow for me as a fan and for me as a believer. And I would like to clarify, like, I think heading in the right direction was maybe the wrong way to put it. I do have confidence in Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott to do the right thing. I'm starting to run low on confidence that they're going to start taking these lessons that they talk about every year, because we've
talked about them needing a running back and a running game for like 2 years now.
I don't disagree with you. We've talked a lot about my love for Devin Singletary.
Second wide receiver, maybe.
Yeah. I think a true wide receiver too, and a better offensive line. I think the pendulum for me with Singletary has swung. I think I'm okay with letting him walk. Unfortunately, there's just resources elsewhere that they need. They got to re-sign Tremaine Edmonds. I think you got to extend Ed Oliver. It's going to be hard. I mean, Poyer might go. It might get worse before it gets better for Buffalo, and I think the coordinators are the first. How about Leslie Frazier? Temperature check? Leslie Frazier?
I am less concerned because we've seen Frazier's defense play phenomenal for multiple years. But Ken Dorsey, this is his first year being an offensive coordinator, and look at the drop-off. They were still good. They still found ways to win. But if you remember, especially how they were at the end of last season, you think about the 7 touchdowns and 7 drives against the Patriots, going toe-to-toe with Mahomes and only losing because it was overtime and they lost a coin toss, ended up getting the rule changed. Yeah. All of those factors, they were absolutely playing at the peak of their powers. And short of those first few games to start the season against who we now know is subpar competition, they never looked like that again.
No.
The one difference is the offensive coordinator.
I like the take, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a polite mutual parting of ways or Dorsey takes a head coaching job. I'll be honest with you. I'm probably 40-60, 60-40 on letting him go. But it'll be interesting to see because Josh loves him, and Josh has a big voice in that room. But
it'll be hard to see that after a year. I mean, they still made the divisional round. They still won the division, the AFC East. They still finished with the number 2 seed.
Things have to be better. They got to upgrade Gabe Davis. I mean, I don't think he's a 2. I hate to say it. I like him a lot as a player. Rotational 3, like situational 3, maybe.
Great red zone target. But yeah, not a guy that you can. Certainly not a Devontae Smith to AJ Brown type.
Exactly.
And that would really help. We do have another game to cover. Kevin, I hope that this was somewhat cathartic for you.
That was so cathartic. I appreciate you guys so much.
Wonderful.
Good. Happy to help. Let's go into the final game of Divisional Round Weekend. A game that I was probably the most confident in, short of maybe Philly, New York. It was still close, but I never once thought that Dallas had a chance personally. And I said that on the show. 19-12 in Levi. Very much a defensive game on both sides of the ball. I will give kudos, especially in the first half, for Dallas playing well, especially on the defense, keeping the game close. But ultimately, one quarterback finished with a 39.9 PFF grade, 2 turnovers, and another quarterback who is the last pick in the draft, 67.7. Not great, but that's kind of where he's always been. Darian, I'll start with you on this one. How did you feel about this game going in, and how do you feel about the Niners now, and how do you feel about the Cowboys?
Well, you know what's interesting? I felt going in similar. I said, I think San Francisco is going to win this game. Another very complete team. But I thought was interesting the matchup between Purdy and Dak, which shows you the inexact science of picking quarterbacks in the NFL. You have a 4th rounder who is starting for one of the most famous teams in the world, the Dallas Cowboys, and then you have Mr. Irrelevant, quote unquote, starting for one of the historic franchises as well. It shows you that it's very hard to find a great quarterback and that fits the system or that works around what is good, their talent set and what works for them. But I thought San Francisco, they're another buzzsaw team. And I think they showed you what happens with good coaching, great talent, and going all in to try to get somewhere and showing that your quarterback doesn't have to be an all-world player. They have to fit into. You have to have the right system for their skill set, have great coaching, and surround them with great talent. Again, another time where you don't have to pay the quarterback. You can have a lot of great players surrounding them when you're not paying the quarterback, which is always every team's is going to be. Everybody has to come to Jesus with that. When you pay the Bengals are going to have it too. They're going to have that when they're going to. I know Joe Burrow can be extended after this season. It all comes down to that. But I thought San Francisco, really strong team. I thought Dallas, I thought it was a little bit of a mirage when they played the Buccaneers with them. The Bucs have not been good all season. They should not have been in the playoffs. They were in a terrible division, so that's why they were in, and they were basically the best of the least in that division. And so Dak looked great. He maybe had his best game ever. But whenever something like that happens, I always look at the regression to the mean. He's going to regress to who he actually is when they come to when you play a better team, and that's exactly what happened. And I thought the loss of Tony Pollard was a big deal because Dallas has they have a lot of good individual players. Pollard's a home run hitter. He's one of those guys, he takes a 50, 60, and without him, you saw was limited. They're relying on trying to get it to CeeDee Lamb and Ezekiel Elliott's, I don't need to say anything about that. It's not the same Zeke.
Fine. You could say
it's limited, right? He's on his way out. He's got a huge cap hit. They're done with the guy probably. So I thought that it never felt endangered to me. I felt like San Francisco is a better team, and I thought Dak became who Dak actually is. He's more akin to Kirk Cousins. That's kind of a better comparison, maybe a little better, but I think
more athletic.
I'm not sure you can ever get.
That's not the first time I've heard that comparison either.
Right.
Darian.
I don't think you can ever get there with Dak. I just feel that. I just don't think he's the guy to get you there. Like you see a Josh Allen we just talked about, he can get you there. They got to fix some other stuff. I don't see it with Dak. 49ers are clearly a better team, and I think it's going to be one of the best matchups coming up next week. You're talking about this is strength versus strength coming up here, and I think it's going to be incredible.
So you mentioned the rookie quarterback thing. I want to give a couple stats on that. And first of all, if you're listening to this as a podcast, I'm going to say it every single episode. Our producer, Anthony Weiner, behind the scenes, put some really cool stats at the bottom here. So make sure to check us out on YouTube. Brock Purdy will be the 5th rookie quarterback to start a conference championship, joining Mark Sanchez, Joe Flacco, Ben Roethlisberger, and Sean King. By the way, if he wins, first ever rookie to start a Super Bowl. It has never been done. But you've mentioned a couple times, Darian, the rookie contract thing. So with Brock Purdy's victory, it guarantees that for, I think this will be the 7th straight year, there will be at least one quarterback in the Super Bowl that's on a rookie contract, because either Hurts or Purdy will make it from the NFC, and Mahomes is obviously not on a rookie contract anymore. Burrow is. So 3 of the 4 quarterbacks left are still playing on rookie deals. Some people say you don't need it. Obviously, the Bucs won with Brady not far away, 2 decades away from a rookie contract. But it just goes to show how valuable that is in team building for the rest of your squad. Maybe that's something Buffalo runs into. Kevin, what were your thoughts watching the Niners dominate the Cowboys, especially in the second half?
Yeah, it was a good game, which I love. I love a good competitive game. One-score games throughout in the playoffs are always exciting because, you have that opportunity at the end of the game to see, do they got to drive in 4th and 2, they punt. Thought there was a lot of cowardly coaching decisions on the weekend as a whole, but especially by the Cowboys.
They were at like the 40 of the Niners and they punted.
It was, there was a couple times where I thought to myself, like, man, you're beating yourself if you're not playing aggressive. And I thought McDermott ran into the same trap. At times, Jacksonville, Dable. I just think when you're up against teams that are better than you or asserting their will over you, you have to take every edge you can get. And sometimes you have to be aggressive. And I think that's where we saw Doug Peterson steal the Super Bowl a couple years back from the Patriots, playing like that. I think that's something I'd like to see a little bit more. I know the analytics crowd are banging the drum for 4th downs, and the anti-analytics crowd are making fun of the analytics crowd for all the times they don't convert. So there's going to be that back and forth. That's going to be a fun pendulum swing that we see. And I'm looking forward to hearing you break that down, Brian, because I know we'll have some fun debates over the offseason on that matter. I'd like to highlight something, though. Teams with 2 great wide receivers are performing a lot better than teams with 1. And I think Dallas has 1. I think CeeDee Lamb is a great wide receiver. I don't think they have another great wide receiver on the roster. Yep. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are both, I think, I would say Ayuk is a little less than the Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown conversation. But you have, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins You know what I mean? I think the Chiefs, unfortunately, might not even have one great wide receiver. Obviously, Travis Kelce makes up a lot of
Kelsey's
that.
worth 2 or 3 good
Yeah,
wide receivers by
exactly.
himself.
So that's something that I think team building wise, and I really liked everything Darian had to say about the rookie window. That is such an important team building mentality. But I'm looking forward to seeing more teams address wide receiver too, because I think that you can't just trot out a guy for your two. You got to trot out a legit player. That was a takeaway I had from this weekend, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it across the league. How do you defend the Bengals? Because even if somehow you shut down Chase and Higgins, oh, by the way, Tyler Boyd has been a wide receiver one in the past.
Even three great receivers.
Yeah, it's like it's so much.
Weapons matter.
Darian, you mentioned earlier about Dak regressing to the mean. I saw the same thing. Like, we know, I think when he threw the first pick, I even said in a chat, like, oh, that's the Dak we know.
Yeah.
So 17 pressures by the Niners, only sacked once, so it might not look the same. And at first, they actually, Kellen Moore, they had a good game plan to get the ball out quick, especially when Pollard was in. That helped. You could dump it off to him, let him get a few yards before he had that ankle injury. But we mentioned the PFF grades earlier, because the Cowboys got pressure on Brock Purdy too. And this is where it gets lost sometimes. Purdy doesn't need to be Mahomes or Burrow or Allen. He just needs to not drive the Ferrari off the cliff. Just, Shanahan's the Ferrari. He's going to do everything. And the fact that he's always hovering around that like 70 PFF grade, that's all he needs. We don't need to be talking about Purdy as the next Montana or the next Brady, because this offense is so good. And you look at Dak and how his PFF grade, which, by the way, you mentioned Darian is maybe his greatest game as a pro against the Bucs last week, 88.6, 39.9. That's a 50-point drop in 1 week because he was facing pressure. The Bucs got zero pressure on the Cowboys last week, and their secondary is awful versus the number one defense in the NFL. So I just like that Purdy passed yet another test. He had clearly faced the best pass rush he'd faced. Micah Parsons might not have had a sack, but he was in there. DeMarcus Lawrence was in there. They were getting pressure up the middle too, and he didn't buckle. And he really only made, from what I could tell, like one bad throw. Otherwise, he either took a sack, maybe held the ball too long, or he hit, Kittle for a number of plays and Ayuk late in the game. He did what he had to, and that's what makes this so intriguing. As we wrap up the divisional rounds, we're going to put up so much on Friday into the conference championship preview. But I'm going to start with you, Kevin. Any last thoughts on what we saw? You can make it Bills focused or all four teams.
I'm very happy to. Yeah, I'm very happy to share my thoughts. I'll go broader. I think the league is in a great place. I think the narratives and the quarterbacks and the coaches, I think football is at its most entertaining it's been in a long time. I loved the old school. I grew up watching Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Ben and Phillip Rivers and those players. And I was a little nervous when they were retiring and the batons were being passed. And guys like Mahomes and Burrow and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy even, which is like kind of weird.
Herbert Lawrence.
I think the league is in its best place that it's been in years. And I am very excited to watch this generation unfold, because we're in the middle of one of the most entertaining stretches I think that we'll have as far as quarterback play and evolution of the game. The cover two shell changed the game, and running matters, and
which is funny because cover two shell has been around for decades.
Yeah.
But it's just so effective against these scrambling backyard football sort of players. And it'll be interesting to see that when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And Darian, I'm going to keep coming back to what you said about Philadelphia. They had an identity. And I think identity matters. The 49ers have an identity. The Bengals have an identity. It never felt like Buffalo had an identity this year. And I'm not surprised that did them in, honestly.
Darian called it, their identity was Josh Allen and company. And that's a problem in a hyper-competitive AFC. Darian, give us your high-level final thoughts as we leave divisional round behind and look ahead to the conference championships.
Yeah, Kevin, I love what you said. The NFL is in a tremendous position. I mean, it is by far, I think you look at the ratings, by far the king of all sports at this point. I mean,
it's king of all television. Like,
I mean, it is the number one rated television show. It has separated itself from all viewing at this point, and the talent is incredible. I think another add to the point, I think coaching matters so much more in this sport than it does in almost any other sport. There's so many people you have to be in charge of in different areas of the offense, defense, special teams, all three phases. Now you're seeing high-level coaching at this point. But you're also seeing, to Kevin's point, the metamorphosis of this game. We're leaving the stereotypical drop back passer behind. It felt like to me, this felt like the end of one thing and the beginning of another. Think about it, a playoffs without Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, pretty much, but a playoffs with all the young guns. The future is now. The young guys of the future, you have to be a little twitchy. You need to have some mobility, maybe not too much where you're getting hurt and things like that, but these guys are great athletes at the position at this point. And I think you're seeing that now. And I think you're seeing that the quarterback, wide receiver, D-line, defensive backs, that's the NFL at this point. You have to be able to draft well in those positions. And I think you're seeing that. And I think we're in for something really special coming up here. I mean, to me, the best teams are in it still.
Yes.
The best teams made it. That's pretty much all you can ask for, I think. You're going to get some high-quality football, so really excited about that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't think anybody can argue with that. I mean, Kevin, you have to say the same. The best 4 teams are currently in the playoffs with a chance to go to the Super Bowl if they win next week. Mm-hmm. And I'd honestly be excited to see any of these teams. They all have things to love about them. You talk about people had written off Jalen Hurts and he was people talking about in the same breath as Tua, and they both have to make a jump. And then all of a sudden we're talking about MVP, Brock Purdy, 7th round pick. The Niners lost 2 quarterbacks in the same season.
And then
I was at that game because I'm a Dolphins fan. I went to the Dolphins-Niners game, so I was there when Purdy came in. I'm like, oh, maybe we have a chance. They got the 7th round pick in. Nope. Burrow is I think becoming this generation's Brady. He's just unflappable. He's Brady, but more athletic, with insane weapons around him. Zach Taylor, who I was ready to write off 2 seasons ago as a head coach. And then, of course, it's crazy to say the old guard is now the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, who's still only, 25, 26 years old, is now the old guard. The Chiefs in the conference championship game for the 5th straight season. Andy Reid, there's a stat, I don't have it in front of me, about quarterback coach duos and going to conference championship games. I believe they're 3rd in the history of the NFL, and something tells me this will not be the last. Thank you, Kevin Phillip Fox. As always, we'll have you on again with Pro Football Demon on Friday to preview the conference championships games. You'll have a whole week to get removed from the Bills' loss.
Thank you. I need it.
It's going to be okay, Kevin. It's going to be okay.
You guys were so helpful. I appreciate it.
That's what we're here for. We got a doctor in the house. We're going to help you out. Dr. Darian Parker, thanks. Your first time on the show. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for your unique insight. Make sure to check out his podcast, Dr. Darian's Social Network, correct?
Yeah, Dr. D's Social Network
Dr.
podcast.
D.
Yep.
There you go. Check it out, guys. Thank you so much. We're getting close to the end of the season, but there's still a little bit of football to talk about. Thank you all for listening, watching, subscribe, like, do all of that fun stuff. This has been the Legit Football Podcast. We'll see you Friday.